Hello my beautiful friends, it's Amanda here, and today I'm trying out a new, to me, brand. I feel like they're kind of new on the scene. I've been hearing a lot about this brand over the past few months online. I'm talking about Blend Bunny Cosmetics, especially on Instagram. A lot of people are posting about these palettes, and a couple of my friends here on YouTube have really been loving the brand. That's sort of what tipped me over the edge to order these palettes and try them out for myself. I ordered the Dollhouse palette and the Surge palette. So we're gonna take a close-up look at each one of these palettes. I'll show you finger and brush swatches, and I'll also show you a tutorial with each one of these palettes. As we go along, I'll give you a bunch of info, and I'll also give you my thoughts and my experiences with these along the way. Before we get into specifics about these palettes, I do just want to say the website was pretty straightforward. They don't have an overwhelming amount of products available for sale, which makes the website pretty easy to navigate. My order shipped and subsequently arrived to me really quickly. I ordered these on July 19th and they arrived to me on July 24th, so they got here super quickly. They were packaged really well, really securely, so as far as using the website, ordering, shipping, all of that went really smoothly for me. Now let's get into the individual palettes. I think I'm going to start with the Dollhouse palette first, since this is the first one I used when my order arrived. So let's take a close-up look at the palette first, and then I'll show you the swatches as well. Here's the front cover of the Dollhouse palette, and honestly, one of my biggest criticisms of this palette is just that the front cover is not really exciting enough based on how pretty the inside is. I really wish some of these beautiful colors, this sort of spin on neutral color scheme, was reflected more on the outer packaging, because it does feel pretty blank, and maybe they're going for just a more sleek type of look, sort of like what NARS does. But I think for this palette in particular, and definitely for a brand like this that is really fun, I wish that there was some more fun packaging on the outside. This palette is priced at $45. It's a little bit more expensive than the other one that I purchased, but this one has a mirror and the other one doesn't, so that's probably where the difference comes in. The top and bottom rows are all shimmers, and then the center 3 rows are all mattes. However, I did swatch these in columns instead of rows because they do seem to be color grouped at least a little bit in columns. That is the best way for my brain to organize it, especially to keep track of all of these swatches. As usual, I'm showing you finger swatches on top, and then each corresponding brush swatch is directly below. That way you can see different application methods here in the swatch. Overall, I'll just sort of spoil it early on here. This is the palette that I prefer of the two. I do think that just in general, the performance is a lot more consistent across the board. I think the mattes are a little bit more of a standout than the shimmers, but all in all, I think this is a really good, solid performing palette with both the finger and brush application. I think the color story is cohesive. It's definitely really approachable, wearable type of color story, but it's not the every warm brown neutral palette that we've seen time and time again. There's a great variety of different tones, different undertones, and there's also a lot of depth in this palette, which sometimes can be lacking in more mainstream neutral palette releases, particularly in terms of very deep, colorful matte shades, and I think this palette is really well-rounded in that regard. The other main criticism I have for this palette, aside from I don't think the cover does justice to how pretty the shades are, is I do think there are a few shades in here that look way too similar to the point where they are pretty redundant, particularly when applied to the eye. All of these shades that you see swatched side by side here, no, they're not the exact same color, but once they're used on the eye, these are pretty much indistinguishable for me. Perhaps on you it's different, but for me, these are pretty redundant shades. This is the palette that I've gone back to over and over again, and of course I had to show you a purple eye look. I am just a purple eyeshadow girl, so I had to show you my favorite purple eye look from this palette. And you can use these columns of color to help you if you're feeling overwhelmed. There's a lot of shades in this palette. 30 shades is a lot to choose from, so you can always go in the column if you need to. I do like to mix it up just a little bit, but that's a really useful way to dig into a palette like this, especially when you're first starting out if you are feeling a little bit overwhelmed. I gotta say, I'm very impressed by the performance of these mattes, particularly these really light pastel colors and the deeper shades. They can be some harder colors to work with, pastels and then really dark colors, because they can be more difficult to blend and to blend together well. And I did not have any issues with this particular palette. I'm really impressed by the way that all of these shadow formulas work together. I do think the mattes are a little bit more impressive. I do think that's the standout formula. But all in all, I have had a great experience across the board with all the different shadows that I've used from this palette. And it really has been a great little staple for me over these past few weeks. So I will say, I think this Dollhouse palette is worth all the hype it's been getting. I see why so many people like it. It's interesting. It's a really solid performing palette. There's a lot of different shades. We have a mixture of finishes. There's different undertones. We get a lot of good light, medium, and deep shades, some approachable colors. All in all, this is a really well-rounded palette, and it's one that I have gravitated towards a lot in my collection recently. So I would say Dollhouse palette, yes, worth the hype. Next up, we're going to take a look at the Surge palette. The Surge palette is slightly less expensive. This one is coming in at $43 US, but there's no mirror in this one, so I think that is accounting for the slightly lower price point here. The Surge palette is mostly mattes. We only have one row of shimmers here. The rest are all mattes. In these monochromatic columns, they're definitely a lot more matchy monochromatic, and then we're getting like a pastel row, a brights row, a jewel tone, a shimmer, and then a neon row. I like the idea here. I wish that there was some sort of like graffiti or something on the outer packaging with that brick wall to match how colorful and exciting the color story is here. I will say this one is not as consistent formula performance wise for me compared to the Dollhouse palette. And you know, when it comes to neons, this is not at all uncommon, particularly these lighter neons like the yellow, orange, pink colors. It's just a tricky color to formulate, and across many different brands, I see these as the kind of problem child shades of many, many different palettes. So I'm not really faulting the whole palette for that, but I will say it does make the overall performance less consistent across the board here. However, on the flip side, with this Surge palette, I really like how intense and foily some of these metallic shades are, particularly with that dry brush application. I'm really impressed. I like a really, really metallic shimmer formula, and these are very bold and bright shimmers, which I really like. I do think that the second half of this palette, the purple, blue, and green section, is much more impressive. If the entire palette performed the way that this half of the palette does, then I would be a lot more inclined to be very excited and have sort of a closer race between the two palettes as far as which one's my favorite, because I do like a lot of these colors, and I think that this half of the palette has a really, really interesting color story. I like using this second half of this palette mixed with the second half of the Dollhouse palette. Here's a quick little shot of those shades all together so that you can see what I mean. It's definitely a really interesting color story that has a good flow to it, and it cuts out a lot of the shades that I didn't prefer from this Surge palette. Overall, I still like this palette. I really like the gradation in colors here, and I do think these metallics are really, really beautiful. It's definitely not a bad palette by any means. I just prefer the Dollhouse palette performance-wise over the Surge palette. Now, somehow I managed to lose the very beginning part of my tutorial. I'm not really sure how I managed to lose it, but it's not very much. It was just me priming my eye with the same party-proof primer that I always use and getting started on my little transition blend here. So we didn't miss too much, but somehow I did manage to not import that clip. I don't know. But anyway, you know, I prime my eyes. That's all we really missed out on. I've noticed that whenever I go to this palette, I automatically tend to stick within the middle 3 rows. That's the brights, the jewel tones, and the shimmers. That's just playing off of my own personal preferences as well, because I'm not a big neon girl and I'm not a big pastel girl. I like having a lot of different options, and I like that idea and that layout in this palette. It's just more of a personal style choice that I don't really tend to reach for those. And that has definitely improved my overall opinion of this palette, because I do think that these jewel tone shades, the nice rich bright shades, and the shimmers are the highest performing shades overall, like formula wise in this palette. So I still have a really good experience with this palette, but it's sort of thanks to the fact that I don't tend to reach for the shades that I feel are the lower performers. I still ended up really loving this look in particular, and I don't tend to be much of a blue type of eyeshadow girl. So anytime I am reaching for the blues in a palette and loving blue looks from a palette, I feel like that's pretty significant. And I definitely love this burgundy and blue color combo. It's really easy to create exciting but not hard to achieve color combos because there are so many nice, rich, beautiful colors in these palettes. So I have to say, even though I don't love Surge, I do still think this brand overall is worth the hype it gets. After swatching these, trying them, wearing them, doing different looks with both of these palettes, I definitely understand what the hype is about with this brand. Obviously, I can only speak for the 2 palettes that I purchased that I've been testing over the past few weeks. If you're somebody that likes a more buildable wash of color type of look, you probably won't enjoy these palettes. They are very pigmented, very bright, very deep, very, very opaque type of shadows, which I like. So if that's what you're looking for, you'll love these. If that does not sound like your thing, then you will probably not enjoy these palettes. All in all, interesting color stories, definitely something a little bit different. I don't think they're for everyone, but I do think that they're for me. I would love to see maybe a smaller palette format because it seems like they have all of these really large palettes. So I would like to see this formula and these interesting color stories pared down a little bit into a smaller, more curated type of palette size. I would love to see that from the brand, but overall, I'm a fan. I'm gonna keep an eye out for what's next. Let me know if you've tried anything from Blend Bunny. What are your favorites? What do you want to see me try next? I always love to hear what you think about things too, so make sure you leave all your thoughts down in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye! This eye look is really cute. I always say, oh, I don't like blue, but then every time I do a blue look, I love it. So maybe I just do like blue. Maybe I'm experiencing with blue what I went through with green over the past couple of years, where I said I didn't like green eyeshadow and now it's one of my favorite colors to wear. I think we're just in the green and blue renaissance of makeup just for fun, honestly. Love that for me. Okay. What was that? I'm an adult. Sometimes I have to remind myself of that. Blend Bunny. Take 2. Why is my air conditioner so loud? I thought we escaped this when we moved, but no. Next, we're gonna taste. We're not gonna taste it. Don't taste it. Don't eat your makeup. Please. Ma'am, you're interrupting. You're interrupting. It's fine. I know, it's fine. My son's playing outside with some of the neighbor kids and Maggie is beside herself because she's not out there with them. But the last time she barked at the neighbor kids and scared them, so I don't really want to stress anybody out. So she's just gonna hang out in here with us, being loud, no doubt. Okay, stop. Lay down. You gotta chill. Chill, baby. I don't know if that made sense. I don't think it did. This little maroon and blue eye look is so cute. Cute, cute, cute. All right, my friends, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for taking time out of your day to check out my video. I really appreciate that. That's cool. You know, you're busy, your time is valuable, and the fact that you spent it here with me watching something I made, that's pretty awesome. I really appreciate that. I appreciate you. I appreciate your face because I love your face. And I will see ya back here on the channel real soon. Okay, bye-bye.